rolling. Welcome everybody to the October 13th meeting for our subgroup of the SIG. Again, the agenda has been posted in the chat. If you haven't already marked yourself as present, please go ahead and do so. I've got a couple things we need to address today, but first and foremost, anyone new who's joining the group like to introduce themselves? I don't think so.
Yeah, I haven't participated in this call before. Been hanging out, but not on this call. Eddie Knight from Sonatype. A couple familiar faces on here.
Good to see you, Eddie.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah, just a quick note. Sonatype is building out a supply chain security education portal, essentially. So I was like, jump in here. I think there's stuff we can add. So.
Absolutely. Thank you very much and welcome. All right. As always, any assistance anyone can provide with scribing the notes, everyone is welcome to type into the document, but if someone would help me scribe as we go through this, be greatly appreciated. All right. First item on the agenda. If anyone has anything they'd like to add to the agenda, please go ahead and add it to the bolded list. We'll try and get that covered today before we wrap things up. The first thing we want to talk about is the spreadsheet. Let's see here. Here is a link to the spreadsheet. So there was not really any changes that were made to the spreadsheet since last time we talked. We do need to get this finalized, and I do want to socialize this with the larger SIG and working group. So wanted to give everyone a chance to speak up here for any additional feedback that they would like to provide. Randall, your hand is up.
We've been working on breaking down David, or getting the breakdown that we used at SKF for David's course. And I have to add that. I didn't get a chance to add that, but I should have that. And I think there's a couple other courses that we have that I'll be adding, not just because they're on the spreadsheet right now, but they're not broken down because a lot of them cover a lot of different parts. So that's what I have to add to this spreadsheet, which I'd like to do maybe today or tomorrow.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Does anyone else have information that they feel needs to be added to the spreadsheet?
No, I haven't made any changes to this, but is the goal now to take the resources at the Dave Word Doc SKF, the ones that have been filled out, and to resort them into the central matrix? And if so, how?
Well, that's how is always the boggle for these things. So the goal here is really to put together the essentially first draft of how we're going to organize our materials. We brainstormed last time and just added stuff to the spreadsheets. Randall and some others have added specific category breakdowns that exist today in SKF. And as you mentioned, the way it's breaking down in David's course, we as a group need to decide how we want it to look at the end of the day for the first draft. This is a dependency for a bunch of other work that's going on, both with our group and some of the other SIG groups. So we need to get this wrapped up as expediently as possible. So if anyone has any ideas or suggestions on the best way to proceed once the additional information has been added, please speak up. Randall, is this a new question or is this from the last one?
I think that
Please.
David Wheeler would be a good person to bring into this meeting at some point, because we had some conversations with him regarding SKF and how he envisions things being broken down, because right now we have it all broken down in courses and that's not really working. So it almost seems like we want to move in the direction of breaking it down in, oh look, Dave joined. But I think
you say his name,
yeah,
and he appears. This is the second time this week.
Beetlejuice.
I know. We were talking about we were just talking about you and your course.
Oh, okay. How can I help or confuse you further?
All right.
No, we were talking about, so Glenn made a breakdown of your course, like
okay.
like a breakdown, and I'm going to transfer that to Krob's spreadsheet. But I
Okay.
was talking about how we are going to track this, because we talked about like how, like, because right now we have it in courses, but it like Glenn's not happy with the way it works because he says it's too confusing. People don't know where to go. So we were thinking about changing that to like specification or like job description maybe, and organizing the material we have, like if it's application security or how we're going to go about organizing things, because we're talking about organizing the spreadsheet as well.
Okay, so we're just talking about organizing this spreadsheet, right? Or what
Correct.
else?
Correct.
Okay.
Eric has his hand up as well. I'm not sure if it's a new thought, Eric, or please.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of tagging on to that and how we're doing all of this, thinking about how the education, are we going to target some of this more toward a persona discussion about what levels of education? I know we'll break that down kind of into a phased approach of education at some point. But as we think about the materials, there's one of the things I added to the spreadsheet or the document to talk about today. The National Cyber Director had put out a new email. I think most of you have probably seen it. Starting to think about how that's broken down into training, education, diversity, accessibility, other things. Is there an area where we want to break that down to target specific types of education for specific groups versus just more generically thinking about it in by content? So I think we should probably factor that in as we discuss it. My 2 cents.
+1 on that, Eric, for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think we have to go down super deep, but things like I'm not sure about K, but K through 12, management, more detail, fundamentals. I mean, I'm mixing up different groups and different kinds of courses, but I think that there's different personas and different areas that need to be dealt with, and also depth. And here we go.
All right. I'm trying to share my screen. I hope you see the right screen and not anything you should be seeing. You should be seeing the spreadsheet. Is that
Yeah, we can see that.
Yes.
great? So as we had a couple of people join since we started talking about this, the goal here is for us to figure out the first draft for how we want to organize the materials that we are collecting and identifying. This was the basic layout that we put together last time that we met. We brainstormed most of the information in this area here. The additions over here were things that got pulled in from OWASP and SKF. And what our job is to determine how to get all this data put together, how to use these tags and categories and such to identify and organize the information we're going to put into this tab, which is going to be the actual course materials and how we're going to sort and organize them. If someone has their hand up, I can't currently see it because I'm struggling with my Zoom interface.
Well, okay, I'm not making an argument to change this spreadsheet because I think right now this is just curating resources and knowing exactly what it is that we have to work with. But for section 3, I'll put it in the comments here. So we've proposed that for the general focus to put the rewards and incentives around. So just kind of an endpoint for me is thinking, what is a sufficient level of education for someone to be rewarded for that, or action to be rewarded out of that? And so for the first year, we're trying to prioritize like secure supply chain, just because I know we can get that, cloud, data, and application security. Most of this right now looks like it's application security, which is good. But I think as an end user of this education, I'm going to want to come to it with a explicit sort of security persona that I'm trying to pursue. So maybe that's what I'm trying to say. Label this by security persona, which I think the target audience is close, but even as like a like a college student, it's real different between AppSec and CloudSec, right?
David has his hand up.
Yeah, I think what I was about to say is somewhat rather similar. That who are we talking about, and what overall do they need to know, and then some of these other things kind of drop out, or at least follow on from that.
Eric also has his hand up.
Yeah, I mean, as we think about kind of curriculum and path to development in that context, I agree that cloud and AppSec are potentially different markets, or at least there is some potential overlap depending on company or organization. But at a learning level for college or secondary, even thinking about that, the level of education they get, are we building a curriculum for a new major, or are we potentially adding these in as components to existing majors as we kind of talk about the learning plan or target audience as we build out an education theme? Because certainly if you're a computer science engineering major, you're going to touch a number of these, but if you're in an actual cybersecurity path, then all of these would potentially be relevant. So it really becomes a conversation about how do we segregate these into meaningful education plans and phase them at each level. It would be my question longer term. I think that needs to be broken down further. And to David's point about granularity at this point is the question, but I do think longer term we'll have to really start getting a little more granular in that context.
Well, sorry. At this time, is it possible just to add in a proposed security matrix focus into this spreadsheet and just tag those with each of the ones that would line up with part 3 of the plan, just to start getting an idea of what we can fully support? Because it is different. Like the CS that people learn these days does not have any cybersecurity in it, or really anything to do with APIs for the most part. It gets ignored. We do need full coverage, but I'd love to be able to tie it back as directly and as soon as possible to those rewards and incentives.
I think Crow has hand up, and then we'll get to Randall and David.
So we currently have no buy-in from academia to modify any curriculum. That is one of the tasks. We're going to try to create people focused on influencing that. And David's mentioned many times how he's tried to in the past, even at a small level, influence curriculum. So that's a goal we want to have, but we should not have the expectation today that we're going to go in and tell universities and colleges around the globe, you're going to change your program. We're going to need to make the content worthwhile and useful, and figure out ways to get them integrated. And like Eric mentioned, it's a big push here in the States. There's an effort to prioritize that. So that's another avenue we potentially could leverage on, jumping on the Office of the Cyber Director's memo and call for a comment to say, we feel these types of things are useful, should be put into curriculum. But I don't know that is a problem for us today to try to solve. It's a future task, and we should, Sal asked, can we change the matrix? Absolutely. That's what we asked last week.
Right.
Please make the matrix useful to you so that we get value out of that before we start putting things in here. Because I would hate to go through and categorize everything, and then someone comes back a month later saying, oh, what about this? And then we have to do a bunch of rework. So please make suggestions, make changes so that the matrix is useful to us going forward. I yield the floor.
Yeah, let me just reiterate that this is not necessarily the set in stone final version. We are going to learn new stuff as we move forward. We're going to need to make some changes, but because there's so many dependencies on having this completed, at least the organization piece that's completed, we do need to make this a priority and get this wrapped up as expediently as we can. Randall.
So a curriculum does exist in OSWAP. It's the ASVF, and they're currently redeveloping it. And and the WSTG, which is their testing guide, follows the ASVS, and SKF is working on realigning itself with ASVS from an app sector or like an app section. That being said, I do know that there is some work with academia. I'm not familiar. I've been told that I will get in touch with the guy that controls ASVS soon. I haven't talked to him yet, but maybe it'd be good to talk to them about it, because I do know there's a lot of work that happens. And there's like it's been redeveloped like 5 or 6 times too. I think 5 times, or I don't know. It's one of those. But so just so you guys know, there is a curriculum for app security that OSWAP has.
Well, ASVS isn't a curriculum. It's a here's some things to do. It's a list of things to do.
They kind of, they're, I don't know. They told me that it's the curriculum, like they use that word. So I'm not. I don't know. I've read it, like kind of, sort of, somewhat familiar, but like, yeah.
I mean, it's the application security verification standard. Anybody who thinks a standard or specification is a curriculum hasn't dealt with students.
I don't think that they're considering it more as like a traditional curriculum, as far as like, we need to cover this material at a minimum.
Okay. All right. It's sort of a checklist for a curriculum.
Correct. So, and I know, as I said, that's like developing, like there's a lot of interested parties in that. According to Glenn, there's even an institution called Crest that gives certifications that are based on the ASVF or ASVS, and they're, according to him, very highly accredited and all that jazz. So yeah.
I don't know what highly accredited means, but okay.
David.
Yeah. Okay. So a quick thing. I would also say, don't try to create a whole, like a degree program. There are other folks who do that. And since yes, I teach a course at a university. So technically I'm in academia, but not in the same sense of I'm not deeply involved in controlling, and working across a country, never mind the world. But I will note that Carnegie Mellon University, I think it was actually specifically the SEI, developed like a whole degree program years back. I don't know if there's been much take up of that, but such things already exist. And I think right now the need is much more for the general developer and the managers and people who might be coming into software development, not for the specialists, where you do want more, a deeper and more courses, but that's probably a different lift. I'm not saying it's a terrible idea, but just I'm not sure this is the right group, and I'm not sure that that's the need right now. And where is the spreadsheet that we've been looking at? I don't have a link to we've been looking at.
I'll drop it in the chat again.
There, gave it to you.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sal.
Just a quick note on, I think, where and how this education should be distributed. So in the section 2 part of this working group consortium, one of the proposed sort of vectors for training and education is going to be major league hackathons, which I think is our perfect opportunity. Their traditional model is to provide the educational curriculum, then train up a set of early engineers or career change engineers into those positions, like SRE roles, for example. Now, I think it makes a lot of sense that if we're pulling curriculum from specific corporate entities, that we create a pathway through which they get the education, and that corporation is then incentivized to pull them into the open source projects that they work with. But to do that, the partnerships that we'll primarily need are to provide this curriculum as a whole back to the corporations that are providing it, and then use that as our education conduit. I think that makes the most sense. For me specifically, my end goal always in this is to not just educate them, get them educated enough to be consumed into a practicing role in open source. So if our metric gets us to them both as a contributor and as a paid contributor, we're in a good spot. So I guess that's the vector that this education can go by. It would look like a nano course. And I think developing it with that as our first pass in mind gets us on a really good roadmap to be able to insert this into more traditional academia that would still have that end goal of getting them into work.
Help me, is that a content type hackathon, challenge?
So they're called Major League Hackathons because they started working in hackathons, but for several years now, they've been building out. Essentially, they do basic training and then they spend several months working with them with an external sort of system of mentorship while they contribute to open source projects.
I have a very specific question. I'm looking at the spreadsheet. Where do I put it?
Oh, for which part?
The cross-ref spreadsheet.
I think you can, for now, make your own, or the XREF is at the very end of the
Yes.
spreadsheet.
Yeah, yes, under XREF, the tab XREF, hackathons. I want to make sure that we include them.
Oh, okay, good idea.
Is this a content type? Is this an target audience? Let's
I think that's a content type for sure.
Always put it there. What I'm trying to do is avoid losing the idea.
Well, and also, is it substantially different than what's already there? Can we?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
So we could put an EG after one of the existing things.
Like
Yeah.
the hands-on / lab or the code.
No, this is kind of code challenges, but maybe real world hands-on. I guess I think maybe making a separation between those because a hands-on lab is very different from I contributed to an OS project. Projects, maybe it fits under that.
It might also come from a different angle, but adding recent grads to the target audience could be some, because that's what MLH is.
I'm just gonna add this at the end and we can merge it. I'm trying to get north. So what we so that's a recent grad under target.
Yeah, so it's both for sort of like advanced, like recent grads, masters, or people who are converting in a field. So someone who's going from DevOps to SRE is what they've been working on lately. And it's basically a 3 to 6 month pathway where their sort of reference to be able to get through the course is whether or not the maintainers enjoyed working with them, which is a really good metric for me. So yeah.
Should we add metrics to this table here?
We should get education on this table before we get metrics into it. But I think the metrics can come a little bit more out of, I think this is just the repository for the actual resources. But in this part 3, the incentives, I'm trying to sort of think about how we're lining those up now with the way we're implementing these.
I know several people have their hands up. I have a very quick question. Is a recent graduate the same as a new professional?
No, I don't think so.
That you
The-
believe there's
with
a
the
substantial
content-
difference?
Yeah, would the content be similar? I think that they're not the same, but the content would probably be quite similar.
So we don't necessarily want to get too granular, I think, on this. We want to try. I mean, there's not going to be a perfect delineation of all these different roles, but we want to try and figure out a way to take the content that we have and guide it toward the right group of people. And there's going to be a little bit of overlap. I think we talked about recent grad versus new professional as an example of that. But in my opinion, the materials that individual persona would be looking at are pretty similar. Krob and David both have their hands up before I interjected. David, you can go first.
Yeah. I think actually we've already covered, so I'll just pull my hand back down.
What I'd like to remind us of our current task. I love that we have a lot of amazing ideas and we're starting to do solutioning. We're putting the cart ahead of the horse. We have to finish revising the plan, something that we feel is achievable with, again, resources and timelines, and then we need to propose it for the governing board. Then we can start to building the airplane, so to speak. So we need to get this plan finished because the governing board is becoming very anxious, and we would like to make sure we still can capitalize on their goodwill and continued funding for our efforts. So if we could try to focus on getting the plan in a reasonable enough state that we think has enough detail that we can move forward, but not enough that we are getting down to the microscopic level. That would be useful for us in the short term. And then again, I still want to capture these ideas. There's been some great things in all the working groups, but we again need to get the plan finished because we don't have any funding yet. And we're risking the wrath of our sponsors potentially if we don't start to have something to talk about.
And that is the best unplanned segue into the second bullet point I have for the meeting today. But before we go to that, we're about halfway through now, so I think we should probably stop talking about this and move on. Here's the homework that I am proposing. Here's the schedule I'm proposing. Again, I know it's the third time I've said it. I promise it's the last one. Getting this organization together is a dependency for a lot of things, not just with our group, with the other groups too. They're waiting on this. So I suggest that all spreadsheet feedback and suggestions, and there's been a lot of good ones here, be in place by next Tuesday, October 18th. There's an education SIG next Wednesday, October 19th. I'm good friends with the person who moderates that meeting, and I think I can get myself on the agenda to talk about this, but we need to get this finalized by the end of next week. 21st.
What does finalized look like?
Finalized is the first draft that we are going to move forward with actually executing on and sorting the educational materials that we have gathered using those different categories that we come up with in the spreadsheet, and providing this spreadsheet as an artifact to these other groups so they can also use it to organize some of the things that they're doing. So that will effectively become version 1.0.
And as we learn new things, we can continue to grow and evolve it. But we'd like to try to minimize the amount of rework we have. We don't want to totally burn it down and have to rebuild it in 2 months.
Right. Which is why I personally, I think we should try and stress flexibility, not get too specific or too granular with some of these things, because we are going to run into situations where we're going to need to make some changes and tweaks as we learn more stuff. Is everybody good with that timeline I just outlined?
So by Tuesday next week, this spreadsheet needs to be totally finalized.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy to do another call on this next week. One thing that I think that we'll want to agree on and probably do this in the Slack is just like a half a page or paragraph that states what the intention was of the spreadsheet and what the key identifiers are that we'll be working with from it. I can help to write that up, but that'll be a conversation. So, and that also has to come together sort of with the data coming together. So, but I do think just a session straight on the spreadsheet would make a lot of sense.
I can try and get something on the schedule for next week.
Yeah, if not, I think we can do that on Slack as well.
Is that, let me think here. So the SIG meeting is on Wednesday morning, US time. I would assume that if we were going to have an extra meeting, it would need to be prior to that, either Monday or Tuesday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then Sal, you suggested putting a blurb together.
Yeah, I'll do that in part. Like that'll be my sort of takeaway as well as we're curating through and making sure we have that final content. Then I can take that really nicely and we can take those identifiers through to the other two parts.
Great. Thank you very much for that. And we'll work through that on Slack. So the rest of the group is free to contribute to that once Sal has the initial content together. Anything else about the spreadsheet? All right. I want to spend the second half of the meeting talking about the plan. I see someone put information into the agenda about the recent email from the National Cyber Director. I'm not sure who did that. Anyone would like to fess up to adding that?
Yeah, that was me. This is Eric.
Hey, Eric.
I'm sure.
Did you want to speak to that?
Well, I think, some Crow put in a thing here where there's actually a mailing list thread that's addressing this. But I think it kind of points a little more toward the importance of the training education across all these levels that we were already discussing. But I think as they're asking for a broader scope of input, really kind of enforces the need to really come up with our solution as quickly as we can so that we can come to the forefront and show this group of people and this part of the foundation really is the leader in where we should be going, I guess is kind of the thought I'm having. But I'll look at the mail thread Probe put together, or whoever put that together, and see where I can help add to that. No,
Yeah,
this
thank you.
goes across all of the groups really based on what they're looking for, but calls out the education quite clearly.
If I may, the U.S. White House had their Biden executive order last year that kind of spawned off our efforts in the mobilization plan in this SIG. They had a summit earlier this year where they invited industry luminaries, and the LF was represented in the OpenSSF. And this was specifically targeting a deficit in cybersecurity professionals, the hiring gap, so to speak. And so it's very targeted on education, cultivating new learners or career changers getting into this career path to help fill a lot of these open roles, and how to get them the necessary skills and experiences so that they can become effective practitioners. I posted a link in the Zoom chat with a straw man of a response that this group potentially could put forward. To say this is who we are, this is what we're doing in response to this effort. By all means, this is not, our group is not exclusively focused on the states, but I think there's the opportunity here if we can capture. We have the attention of policymakers here in the states, and I think that would definitely translate around the globe if we're able to entice them to participate. Be aware of us, and do things like we talked about, influencing curriculum. Well, if we can get the U.S. Department of Education to talk to academia, that might be useful. And then we can take efforts around the globe afterwards. But we have this right now, and a mentor of mine said, "Never waste good pain." So we have some pain here. People are trying to mitigate. So let's put together a interesting and cohesive response as this group to say, this is what we are doing to address this problem. We would like to participate in trying to help solve it. So please, patch is welcome. Add, remove, delete, anything you see. Emily's already hopped on this. So please add this. And also for the companies you represent, you are also free to, this is an open call for comment. So if, for example, the Red Hat or the Microsoft were interested in doing their own proposal, cool. Here's some additional context you might be able to provide your internal organizations.
Thanks for that, Crobe. I dropped the link to the draft response in there with Crobe's comment. And encourage everyone to take a look at that when you have an opportunity. But for now, because we need to have a plan before we execute the plan, it's going to move on to the plan. So the full Stream 1 plan needs to be in Crobe's hands by December 1st. That is the date he has requested. That gives us 3 meetings, including today, to complete our section of that plan. We need to come up with the goals, the milestones, a rough timeline, and any budgetary asks that we have. We made some changes in prior meetings. I took a run at making some adjustments prior to this meeting to start the conversation. If everyone would scroll down, and I think maybe I'll share my screen again for this one. Let's see here. Hopefully you guys can see that. I took the text that we have in the current version of the plan in the repo, and I copied and pasted it here. Anything highlighted is a change that was made. These are suggested changes that I have made just to try and get things started. But we have 6 goals that we need to make sure that we've got a reasonable high-level plan around to proceed with. And Crow, this is going to get presented to the governing board, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
who,
we'd
as I
share
said
it with the
earlier-
TAC first and then the governing board for they're making the process for funding, but we'd share it with the TAC first and then figure out how it gets shown up.
All right. So again, I think we have goal 1.1 in relatively good shape. If there's additional changes that we need to make for that, we certainly can. But we have our work cut out for us to get through the rest of this and get it completed by the end of November. So I'd like to spend the rest of today's meeting on this. I would like to also ask that between meetings, please contribute, make feedback, suggestions, suggestions for additions or changes. We can do it in a document. We can do it as pull. It's probably easier to do as pull requests since we already have this in the repo. But yeah, we need to make sure that we've got this ready to go in relatively short order. Questions about the goal? Okay, I hate Zoom. No one has their hands up. Cool. Let's start at the top and work our way down. Again, anything highlighted is a change that I've proposed. I am not married to this. If anyone disagrees or would like to see something different, please speak up and weigh in. For goal 1.1, review existing educational materials for gaps and opportunities. We have identified 0 dependencies on this previously. I have wordsmithed a couple of these, but I also added some high-level dates to these things. And again, right now, these are not dates we're going to be holding anybody accountable to, but we do need to indicate roughly when we anticipate this work happening and being done. So we actually completed the first one. The document is there. It's not fully stocked, but we have a document. We're collecting that information. The second one is the spreadsheet. I called it a materials matrix. That's just a term that I used. Again, if anybody has a better suggestion, we can certainly use that, but it makes it easy to identify rather than saying the spreadsheet. We need to get that completed, as we said earlier, prior to the end of this month. I consolidated the next couple because they are actually the same activity, just focused on different areas. This is reviewing the existing secure development materials from the following sources. We identified specifically the Linux Foundation, OpenSSF, OWASPs. I put the other OSSF member organizations in there to be a generic covering of any additional groups that are affiliated or we are aware of, or we want to gather information from. We don't need to list them all. We do need to cite them as part of gathering the evidence, but that does not need to be part of the milestone itself. Everyone okay-ish with those changes thus far? Randall?
I just had a question. If we can send a mailing or like an email blast to all the member organizations in OSSF, if they do have like educational material, because I know like Sneak, I don't know how to pronounce their name. They have a bunch of educational material, and I don't think what's his bucket's on this call.
Dan.
Dan.
I believe
I was gonna
it's
call him
Steve.
David.
Well, that
Never
would be
have enough
in
days.
line.
Yeah.
Well,
We
that's
need
true.
more Davids. So, yes,
I agree.
we absolutely can. I don't know if there is a single mailing list. We can talk with Jory. I do not have the cycles today to do that because my ass is in this chair until about 6 o'clock tonight continuously.
No worries.
But if that is something we absolutely can and should do, and like for example, Jeff Borick from IBM is and Arnaud are running that internally in IBM. I'm running that internally at Intel. But there are many organizations represented here, and you're right. Sneak does have a lot of really good material, and Dan has mentioned it from time to time.
Jonathan Meadows has an end user guide he's been
Yep.
working on as well.
I'll be talking to him very soon.
Yeah, me too.
All All right, so I added that. That'll be a task.
Now, just to
Anything-
clarify real quick,
Mhm.
just to clarify, because in our education SIG, SKF is at the center of this. So I feel like I should bring this to Glenn to group 2 because he should also be here and involved. No?
For what? The email?
Well, I mean, I know that he controls SKF in general. So I mean, if all the intent is to merge this or merge a fair amount of this into SKF, I think that's a Glenn thing, right?
Glenn absolutely should be informed and a willing participant. Yes.
Okay. Because he wants me to keep him informed about that because this is a hard meeting for him to get to because of time zones and work and stuff.
Understood. The next bullet point on here is something that I added after a conversation I had with Crow. We really need to have a program manager to run all the stuff that SIG is doing. This is only one section of 3, and there's a lot of other stuff. So we're putting a request in here to hire a program manager to run the entire education stream 1. It's part of this group because it had to be part of some group, and I volunteered just to have it here. That's why this request is here. We just put it in. It's something that would be extraordinarily useful to help keep things organized and make sure we're executing on the plan and keeping it on track.
Yeah, and this is an execution thing. Once the plan is approved, which I hope it will be, we have to have someone to help run it as kind of their duties and not as a necessarily a volunteer.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Then for the remaining 2, I didn't change any text in there. I did add a couple high-level dates. Again, these are swipes I took. If others see it differently, I invite your feedback on those. Under budget, as you can see, I added for the program manager. That's what we've got for goal 1.1. Does anyone have any additional milestones, budgetary asks that they think should be added to this goal? Randall.
Sorry, I forgot to put my hand down.
Oh, okay. Anybody else? All right. If you think of something after the meeting's over, again, please, I will make changes to the plan with what we talked about today, as I have been doing. Feel free to add pull requests for changes that you see or would like to see, and we can certainly review those at the next meeting. Moving on to goal 1.2. This is create an open educational resource library of secure development practices. So thinking about dependencies for this, obviously we need to have the materials matrix completed. We need to have a review of the existing materials that have been put into the brainstorming document, and some type of verification of public availability or being allowed to use them. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to do that at the moment, but that's something that we do need to do. Are there any other dependencies that anybody has you'd like to add right now for this goal? Under milestones,
I do
Go
have
ahead, David.
it says secure library of practices. I'm not entirely sure I know what we mean by that. Is this just a list of things to do, or these are not training materials? These are something else.
This would be managing all the content we either have aggregated together, pointers, or that we create. So someone to help us manage that.
Okay, so these are learning materials, not practices. Yeah, there we go.
Yes.
How about that?
That's so much clearer. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Thank you for reducing my confusion. Don't worry, there's more where that comes from.
That's why I'm here, man. You let me know. All right.
Does that also depend on the program manager, or is that not a dependency for that?
Actually, I'm sorry, if I heard you correctly, you were asking if the program manager is a dependency for us for this goal?
Yes, yes, sorry.
I don't think having a program manager is dependency for us doing this. I think a program manager is necessary for the success of the entire stream. But if program manager is not approved or hired, we can certainly continue doing this on a volunteer basis as we have been.
I agree.
All right. Again, if anyone comes up with any dependencies, please feel free to add them. Under milestones, we only had a couple here, and I think the second one is actually more of a task than a milestone. So the first one is hire the librarian to manage, coordinate, and maintain the content in the library. Just a side note, we do have that listed down here under budget. And then the second bullet here, again, this is not a milestone, this is a task. Decide where, perhaps an open educational resource platform or an LF training certification platform. So I think the milestone on this is more like determine, is the question, let me ask the question, is the question, where are we going to host all these materials? Or where is the organization for the materials going to be kept? Or is something that I didn't mention? I see Crobe nodding.
Yeah, we
Anyone
need to
else
have
feel
somewhere
away?
to store it. It's where people can go check books out of the library, so to speak.
Okay, so then this is a task. Is everyone okay with this?
Yeah, just a question on the budget though, this 300K yearly, is this for a single librarian of sorts?
Yeah, that's the figure the foundation agreed upon for FTEs for this initiative.
Cool.
So I think that's fully loaded with benefits. Targeted, it's a US based salary, but that location could be, that person could be anywhere.
Okay, cool.
But that's just generically for budgeting. They said use this as for FTEs.
Also,
Interested in applying?
I am now, yeah.
Also, for the record, the API for SKF also provides all the material in Markdown. That's one of the things they're working on.
Yeah, and then maybe
Sure.
that's a choice we go with, is that's where the
Yeah.
library store potentially, but that's a TBD decided. And
Yeah.
Sal, that isn't necessarily the 300 isn't necessarily what someone would get. So you would think that generally an employee is half salary, half benefits. So you would, your take home would be roughly half of that, depending on where you live.
While we're talking about milestones, I will also note that we put another line item under the budget here, 100K for tooling. I'm not sure what that tooling was intended to do, but we are asking for it. So we need to come up with a little bit more detail as to what that's going to provide.
That's hosting the library. Either, it's getting additional storage on an LF web server or adding more SD cards to Glenn's Raspberry Pi array. Whatever that.
The good old
Well,
days.
actually, you bring up a good point because it's actually Azure. It's like everything.
I
is
know.
Azure.
I helped him get it flipped over, but I'm joking. But
Okay.
wherever all that stuff's going to go, it's going to cost some money, and potentially we might need to buy or build a tool. So we're
Okay.
putting some funds towards that effort.
Because I know that he loves Azure.
He loved his stack of Raspberry Pis.
Yeah, it's have to be run by 12 Raspberry Pis in his desk.
It was legendary. It was legendary.
Yes, absolutely.
Obviously we don't need to, hey, we got to figure out a way to get rid of 100K. But I do think we need to find, we're going to need services of some kind. We may be able to get some donated, but in the end, we're going to need to figure out what the resources are. I'm not expecting storage to be an issue, to be honest. I mean, stored on GitHub, stored on GitLab, but I do think that running a service is a potential issue. That's, maybe tools isn't the right terminology here. terminology services. Yeah, I think
Well,
it's
no, that's
service.
exactly it. Because I think, yeah, we're gonna have a data storage thing if we want to. We can also just run this in APIs and hope that they're running on the other side. But if I want to have something that queries on top, that is asking for service, right?
Yep. All right. So then ready a milestone up here.
Happy to spend less if we don't need to spend that much, but I would be shocked if there won't be needing for some money for services and such.
Yeah, and then that's just a pure swag. I guess, we know we'll need something
Yeah.
for something.
Got it.
So let's
Well,
get
you'll-
it put in there and we can.
You'll also need it for runtime environments to actually show examples. So that's what we should be setting it aside for.
So we are just a couple minutes from the top of the hour. I would again encourage everyone to please take a very close look at the details we have in the plan. I will update it by end of day today with the changes we've talked about in this meeting. But we absolutely need to flesh out the milestones, some rough time. Well, the milestones are the most important thing. Dependencies and milestones. After that, we can put a rough timeline together and then the budgeting things as well. So what I really like everyone to do in the next couple of days before the education SIG meeting next Wednesday, please go in, provide your feedback, your additions to dependencies and milestones. We'll get those reviewed and ready for this next meeting that we have in 2 weeks. And by the end of that meeting, I think we need to have at least a good draft of all this information. So that gives us another couple weeks to finalize things and get it ready for the end of November deadline date.
Could I grab a link to this? If someone can send it to me, that'd be
To
awesome.
the notes document?
No, to this doc, or this is the notes document.
Yes, it is.
Oh, perfect. All right, awesome.
I'll put it in the chat again as soon as I stop sharing my screen because the chat window goes away. Zoom.
You need more screens, dude.
I've got 3. I guess I need 2 more. I don't know. All right, Christine.
I just had a quick question on one of the items for 1.1 was related to more like the gap analysis and finding out what's missing. And so I kind of did not see that downstream in terms of any of the dependencies. So I was just curious, do you think it feeds into 1.2 as a dependency or further down the line on the determined venues and personas that the content will be created for?
I think you are correct that it will have some downstream trickle. I think the primary dependency for the result of that is probably going to be something section 2 is going to work on as far as creating or sourcing additional materials to fill in some of those gaps. That is definitely a good call out.
Okay, that's good. That's what I was suspecting. I just wasn't sure.
Christine, are you going to be on the call for the implementation group?
Yes.
Perfect. So my aim is to come out of our discussion for the spreadsheet, having 2 paragraphs, one that states like, here's the resources we had, here's how we've organized them. And the next statement is going to say, literally just calls out the data columns that we have, and then how we propose to extend them into part 2. I need these for part 3 as well. So that, I think if we can build that, that's why I want to really build that in discussion. But yeah, I'll bring that to part 2 and say, hey, this is what we're working with from part 1, but help me see what we can do.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, and like I said, please, I'm going to try to get this on the agenda for the SIG meeting on Wednesday as well, maybe just as a reminder, but milestones, dependencies by next Wednesday. Again, I'll get this updated, use PRs to do that, and we'll have something to look at. All right, anything else for today?
For 1.3, we're going to have to add in formally documenting the personas we land on. There's going to be a larger foundation effort around personas. So we want to make sure that we can just kind of drop in our work product into that larger effort. And this is kind of the theme / learner. So this is like what we talked about earlier. So if we can get these semi agreed upon, That'd be super.
Other, got it. Oh, FSF work groups. I just added a milestone for that. Thanks, Crow. That's a good call. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Good meeting. Everybody has a
useful
good rest of the day.
sometimes.
Hey, that spreadsheet's awesome.
Took hundreds of hours. Later.
Hundreds. See you, everybody.